one, check one.
Rise for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Casper.
Here.
Dunlap.
Here.
Shalata.
Patty, say here.
Here.
Malloy. Lloyd, here. Barry.
Here.
Nunza.
Here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to do, there was a printed agenda, but we're going to do things just a little bit different. We're going to start the meeting by taking 5 minutes and going into a closed session with just the board. It shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes, then we'll come back. Then we'll do the presentation by the superintendent of the new guidance. Then we'll do public comment, and then we'll move from there. Okay? So can I have a motion for closed session, please?
I move that we go into closed session for the establishment of reserves or settlement of claims as provided in the Local Governmental and Governmental Employees Tort Immunity Act.
Second.
Discussion? Secretary, call the roll.
Casper.
Yes.
Dunlap.
Yes.
Shalata. Lloyd, yes.
Patty.
Barry.
Yes.
Nunza.
Yes.
You're just voting to go into closed session?
Okay, great. So we'll be back no more than 5 minutes.
Where are we going, Brian?
B50.
In-person learning and safely returning to in-person school is the priority for this fall. Very happy to say that the state superintendent and then the CDC both reaffirmed that the commitment is to 100% in-person school this school year. So that's something we agree with. Guidance emphasizes implementing layered prevention strategies. So the key is really using the right number and the right layers of prevention strategies to make sure that everyone at school is safe, and that we're also being restricted only to the extent that we have to in order to prevent illness. You'll recall last year when we returned in person in the spring, we had many layers that resulted in very little, if any, transmission at school, and we're very happy about that. We want to continue that trend, but maybe we can continue that trend with a bit less restriction. Strategies may be added or removed over time in response to the risk of COVID-19 in the school or community. This is one of the things that I like the most about the updated guidelines, is it's not mandating these 10 things and then you've got a few other things you can do optionally. It's really empowering local school boards to take a look at the circumstances within the district, positivity rates in our community, how many kids are catching COVID at our school buildings, and make decisions based on that. And because we've been so successful at preventing illness, that suggests that perhaps we don't have to do quite as much as we did before in order to keep people safe. The CDC still says vaccination is currently the leading public health prevention strategy to end the pandemic, and that masks should be worn indoors by all individuals ages 2 and older who are not fully vaccinated. They did use the word should. In previous guidance, they used the word shall. So should is a softer term. And one thing that they're absolutely clear about is that masks must be worn on the bus. You'll know that even in phase 5, the governor, for public purposes, public transportation, buses, trains, airplanes, those are places where even vaccinated folks must still wear a mask. So the CDC saying that we must wear masks on school bus is at least consistent with public policy. Next slide, Vern. So now we're going to get into the prevention strategies themselves. I'm ready for slide 5, Vern. And here they are, and these are things that you're very familiar with: promoting vaccination, mask use, distance, testing, frequent testing, good ventilation in the schools, hand washing, proper etiquette. That's something that's in the curriculum in our elementary schools already, but something we've been emphasizing. Obviously, staying home when sick, getting tested when you've got COVID symptoms, contact tracing that results in potential isolation or quarantine, isolation for folks that are sick, and quarantine for those that have been close contacts. Although the definition of close contact has the potential to change now, fortunately, and we're going to talk more about that. And then cleaning and disinfection, although they have backed off of that and saying that contact, or that surfaces are not, they don't believe are a major contributor to transmission like they suspected that they may have been in the past. They said a return to regular daily cleaning in schools is sufficient, as opposed to having to do another round of cleaning midday. So that's good news from our buildings and grounds perspective. Slide 6, Vern. So the primary factors that we should consider when we're making our local decisions is how much community transmission is there, how much local vaccination coverage we have, whether or not we're using a screening testing program at the school, whether or not there's a current outbreak of COVID-19 either in our school, in our district, or in our communities, and the ages of the children that are served. On slide 7, you can see the indicators and thresholds for community transmission. Vern, I want to kind of bounce back between this slide and the next one. So on this slide, on slide 7, you'll see a number of cases per 100,000. If you have less than 10, you're in the low. 10 to 49, you're in the yellow, moderate. 50 to 99, you're in the orange, substantial. And if you have more than 100 per 100,000, you're in the high transmission area. And if you look at slide 8, it talks about our history. So in March, we had 87 per 100,000, which was substantial. In April, it went up to 161. which is high. On May 1st, it was 137, which is still high. June 1st, it fell to 58, which is the low end of the substantial orange. And then since July 1, July 1, we fell for just briefly into the low. And then we're currently in the middle of that yellow moderate transmission. So you'll see that, while our local transmission rates are considerably lower than they were at their peak, they're still moderate, which means...
Compared to the flu in previous years?
So this is just a presentation from the superintendent. We're not taking public comment as of yet.
And then, Vern, let's go to the last slide here. So there's some additional considerations. Obviously, there's lots of things that we do in order to run the school day successfully with regard to not just whether or not students wear masks or how far apart they have to sit, but how we feed them meals, how they participate in sports and other curricular activities, and extracurricular activities. But the idea then still is distance whenever possible, as much as possible, as you move through food service and while eating. It sure sounds like they're at least implying that the distance at lunch can be 3 instead of 6 feet. They're at least implying that we can feed students through a line. That was their example that they gave, as long as we provide a bit of distance. And then also the consideration that students and obviously adults that are fully vaccinated don't need to wear a mask during sports and extracurricular activities. And, if the board wanted to reconsider testing, then that would be another factor that would allow you to be comfortable relaxing some of the other mitigation strategies. So, that's just a pretty decent summary of what the guidelines say, but we've got to talk about, the nitty-gritty, and that's, whether or not students and staff are going to wear masks. Does it matter whether they're vaccinated or not in order to do so? What's going to be our definition of a close contact? How are we going to treat people that are close contacts of somebody who's positive? What we're going to do for lunch? And then the other stuff. Student daily health assessment by their parents. Are we going to take their temperature at the door? On and on and on. And the thing to consider is, it's interesting. We did so many things over and above what I just said last year. Cohorting kids, which sounds easy, but, at the middle school, that's a real drag, because some kids are in accelerated this and not in accelerated that. You can't cohort those kids together and then both get what they need. It's a little bit easier at the elementary school because they're naturally cohorted for most of their day by being in the same homeroom class. But we did other things that at the time felt incidental because we were just so happy to be in school. Like having kids sit in desks in rows again. Maybe the way we went to school when we were kids. Instead of flexible seating, flexible grouping, cooperative learning, group learning, all the things that make learning in 146 so rich. And teachers rolled with it. And it'd be surprising, we've got many teachers that are so good at progressive teaching strategies that lecture and discussion in traditional desks and rows, they just went with it, but it was a learning curve for them too. So there's a number of things that I didn't list here that we did in order to prevent transmission. And to be honest with you, those things to me, if what I believed or thought was just going to be universally accepted, it'd be really easy for me to say, do we feel like we could stop doing all those other things if we just wore masks? Because those things are really dear to us as far as the quality of teaching and learning and the quality of the student and teacher experience. having kids wait in line to get their temperature taken as they come in the door, having mom have to fill out a daily slip, us having to collect the slip and keep it, box them by day in case we need to find one, and then the cohorting and the type of instruction that we're able to do. And kids sitting 6 feet apart, all facing the same direction, not allowed to turn around to talk to the kid behind them. Kids naturally want to be social. We want kids to be social. The social emotional learning is an important part of our curriculum. And how do you keep a kid from turning around and talking to their peer when they've been looking at a computer for the last how many months to get their education? So we have to remember that all the adults that are working in our buildings because they love kids. So it was a bit of a conundrum. I'd love to stop doing as much of that stuff as we can do to get a regular school experience as much as we can back to kids. I don't know if that means they have to wear masks to do that. We've got some of our neighbors that are recommending mask wearing for non-vaccinated kids and adults, and making it optional for vaccinated kids and adults. I mean, if you recommend it, is a bit of the onus on the individual for their decision. Tough to say with a kid, certainly for the adults, that's easy. They work for you, so you can say, this is recommended. And then if they do or don't, they're grown people. It's a little bit more complicated with kids. You also may have some kids that their parents' will is that they wear a mask all day, but the kid's will is not. And when the kid's at school, be tough for us to know which ones parents want us to make them wear it and which ones don't. By doing the optional and recommended thing, I think there's gonna be challenges along with it, but I think it gives the most people most of what they want. And, the board's received a good number of emails. I've received a few more. I've forwarded the board a couple on each side of the argument. And, typically it's people on the ends of the arguments that are moved to communicate with you or with me, and not those that are in the middle. But there's some people that very passionately believe that we'd be doing a disservice to the health of our community by not continuing to be conscientious about some mitigation strategies, and some others that believe quite clearly that it would be tyrannical for us to do so. And there's every opinion in between. And unfortunately, we're in another polarizing moment like we were so many months ago, where I don't believe that there's anything that this board could do that would be extraordinarily popular to many. I think you can satisfy one or the other, or do something measured and dissatisfy both. And here we are. So these are the decisions we have to make. And what I'd like to see this board do is, Vern, can you go back to the slide that talked about
The 9 strategies.
yeah, it's slide 3. Strategies may be added or removed over time in response to the risk of COVID-19 in the school or community. That was a flexibility, a power that this board didn't have under the previous guidelines that you do have under this guideline. We quarantined over 500 kids last spring over the course of those few months. And of those 500 students, 2 of them got sick. And one of them we think probably caught it from a student. We don't know that they did, but probably did. And another may have. Of course, these 2 students were, if they were too close to a classmate at school, certainly they were too close to a classmate or a friend at a home or at a store, at a game or whatever. So really, I think it's generous for us to assume that either one of them caught it at school. But the bottom line is, it's clear that the things that we did last year worked. It's not clear how much of those things we have to do in order for it to work. We know that if you do them all, it works. But I sure would like to try something that we think is reasonable, that's consistent with our cases per 100,000 being substantially less than it was when we were doing all of these things, and see if it works. And if no one is getting sick still, do even a bit less than that. And if kids start getting sick, do a bit more. But also understand that there's all kinds of things that are beyond our control that are going to happen that may cause us to have to change things. You know, right now, the 4 variants that are out right now, we believe that the vaccine is effective against all 4 of them. If there's a variant that comes out that the vaccine is not effective, we're going to need to remask or whatever until there's a booster that covers it and that enough people get it. So I like the idea of us being able to manage it. The CDC, the IDPH, ISBE in particular, has put it on local school boards to make local decisions. I'm glad that that came with the power to consider local metrics in deciding what to do. So I think it's time now to start having some opinions about that. And like I said, I wasn't going to come to this meeting with recommendations. I wanted to be a workshop so I can start having a clue what the community wants, start having a clue what the board wants, and then come back and make recommendations as quickly as we can after. And I'm happy to share what my opinions are now, you know, as part of the discussion, if anyone would like to start.
I just have a question about the transmission rates. We had, when the data first started coming out a year and a half ago, when this was fresh, the state didn't provide by school district. We were basically compiling it by zip code, and we're in 3 different zip codes. Is this like a running average between the 3? How is this
Yeah.
data compiled?
Dean, I'm going to throw it to Vern here in a second, but it's my understanding that we're still in that situation. They don't have it by school district. But what I think Vern's doing, and Vern, correct me if I'm wrong, is taking the communities of Orland Park, Oak Forest, and Tinley Park and creating an aggregate. Is that accurate?
Correct. Northwestern is providing a site where we can put in all 3 zip codes, and then it does an average for those 3
So
zip
it's an average of the 100,000. So 60462, our portion of 60462 is a very small
Correct.
percentage of that. So if there was an outbreak on the west end of 60462, that would affect our number as well. Just as an, and 60452 and 477, same way.
Yeah, Dean, that's correct.
Okay. So this is a very, it gets us in the ballpark of where
This
the number
creates
is.
a
It's not
bigger-
precise.
A bigger land area.
A bigger pie.
Yep.
Right, okay.
But this is as tight as we can get.
Right, I understand that.
And
That was our frustration.
be credible.
Just like with these zones, Joliet had an outbreak and poor old Gatos had to shut down because they were in the same county, nowhere near where the outbreak was.
But Dean, you know, the board has the latitude to consider the data that it believes is relevant. And I think it's important for the board to consider positivity rate within our walls. And then also
Yes.
transmission rate within our walls. Now, obviously, we can't give you that for the summer, but our number of positive cases were very, very low.
They were minuscule,
Spring.
yes.
And our cases of transmission were either
One
none.
out of 250, you said there were 500 kids quarantined too?
0, 1, or 2 out of 500, and I can't
So that-
tell you whether it's 0, 1, or 2.
Less than 1%. As bad as my math is, it's less than 1%.
Less than a quarter of 1%.
Right.
On average. Or I guess that would be a third of 1%.
Other thoughts from the board?
You know, my feeling as I look at this, you know, you can kind of group these mitigations into 2 categories. There are the mitigations that are on us as a school board to deliver: ventilation, cleaning and disinfection, you know, hand washing, that sort of thing, physical distancing, you know, within the classrooms and the like. And then there are the things that we're kind of putting on our families. And as we get kind of deeper and longer into this pandemic, it's getting harder and harder for me to see justifying, how much we're willing to tell people what they have to do to keep other people safe. I think we should do what we can do to keep everybody in our community safe, but then there's got to be, to me, when you start talking about things like masking or vaccination mandates and the like, I think saying they're recommended is great, but when you start mandating it, different people, everyone here in this room, I guarantee, has different opinions about this stuff, and I would encourage everyone to take whatever steps they feel they need to take to keep themselves and their family safe. But it starts to get really, really tricky when you start saying that your kid with, maybe has some sort of attention, has a difficult time staying settled in class, has a difficult time wearing a mask, has to wear it because theoretically someone else may get sick as a result of this. Whereas, that's where I start to, I've always sort of had issues with that, whereas it's like, I'm all for it. Let's upgrade the HVAC system. Let's get extra people in here to clean as deep as we can clean. And that works for, not just for COVID, that works for everything. I think strep throat was probably down last year, flu was probably down, pneumonia, everything. So that's kind of where I'm at, is to say let's do everything we can do as a district on our end to keep kids safe, and then let's throw the ball in the parents' court as much as possible to say do what you feel you need to do to keep your own children safe. That's where I'd like to see us land.
Yeah, I agree with Rick. And I think that we closely watch our local numbers and metrics. And, last year we heard a lot of our hands are tied, and they're not. You're saying, okay, you can make some decisions based on your local metrics at your local level. And, the past year and a half, it was a lot of reactive, and we now have a chance to be proactive. We moved through all the phases, as a state, but also in the schools, from fully remote, partially, half day to full day, and we've continued to progress. And so we as a school need to continue to progress too. So it's, we have to keep moving forward.
I agree with Jeff with the recommended, and I think that families should be allowed to choose, and we change as necessary.
I think that, to piggyback on what everyone said, I think the key component for me is local metrics and is science, and making sure that we are doing everything in our power in an appropriate way to keep our community safe, while also understanding that we are, moving towards a post-pandemic world. We're not there yet, but we're definitely moving in that direction with mitigation strategies and vaccines. So, I have a deeply held belief in the administration and the faculty and staff and the communities that make up this school district. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. And so I believe that we can come up with a plan that does come closer to meeting the magic spot in the middle. As Dr. Sawick said, and I will say to the community before we start public comment, there are no two people with the exact same opinion. Well, maybe spouses, maybe, but in this community around any of these strategies. And we do hear you, and we do see the emails that are sent to the school board. We do see the comments all over the place, in all of the vehicles where we express ourselves in modern life. So I would ask that we be respectful of that as we move towards public comment. We all have differing opinions. We all have passionate beliefs. It's my hope we can be respectful and that we can make our statements to the board in that way, both for board members, administration, but also our colleagues and our other community members. We see some of the rhetoric and some of the things that come up in in the ways we interact with the modern world. And some of that is difficult to process and deal with for all of us. So as long as the board's okay.
Can I, do
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
you mind, I want to just throw out some individual themes and just feel the board out, because these are things that will find their way into the guidance, and we'll be able to move more quickly and then communicate to the community more quickly if I know whether or not these things are going to fly with you before we write them. So with regard to masks, if I'm hearing you correctly, recommend mask wearing for unvaccinated people, but not require it, not ask who's vaccinated or who isn't, and make them optional for vaccinated people, well, for all people, basically. So I don't want to be asking kids whether or not they're vaccinated. I don't want to be asking staff whether or not they're vaccinated. I don't want to be, certainly don't want to be telling people to get vaccinated. But we're going to recommend that if you're unvaccinated, that you wear a mask. But we're not going to check, and we're not going to put it on you if you don't have it on. Is that in the spirit of what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So with regard to quarantining, Vern had the idea, first of all, I thought as simple as moving it from 6 feet for a close contact to 3 feet. There were a good number of classrooms that were at 3 feet in the spring. And you'll see that still no one got sick. So going from 6 feet to 3 feet is a really easy sell for me, because I don't think it's putting kids at risk. Vern had the idea that if our positivity rate in the building and our transmission rate in the building stays near zero, then maybe we could start contacting parents of close contacts so that they can be observed for symptoms. And if they present symptoms, then they would be quarantined and tested before they could return. But we have so many people that we're quarantining that never showed symptoms because they never got sick, and they were excluded from in-person instruction. What do you think about the idea of identifying students that are within 3 feet of a positive person, communicating with the family that we're going to be observing them at school, please be observing them at home, and if they're symptomatic in any way, it's immediate quarantine and send them for a COVID test before they return. Does anybody have any comment about that?
I think we should have been doing that all along, quite frankly. I know we couldn't because of the rules, but that sounds very common sense, and yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea.
Anybody disagree with that? And of course, if we start getting lots of those kids getting sick, then we'll want to maybe go back to anybody inside of 3 feet is quarantined. And we're going to do that option.
Now, they eased up the sick, because that 500 was a large number, and that 2 kids may have gotten sick, but did get sick, but maybe not from us, from being at school.
Yep.
Showed that it was probably too much, and it was incoherent. They were saying 3 feet, you can be within 3 feet, but if you get quarantined, it's within 6.
Yep.
That sounds like a trap
Yep.
to me.
Yep.
We would have that option not to quarantine them between 3 and 6 feet, correct?
Correct. And what I'm suggesting is that we don't. Now, obviously, if
I would
they
agree
develop
with that.
symptoms, they're on the bench right away, just like anybody is.
From what I read, the first thing they said was it's paramount to get the kids back in school. The CDC said that. That was the first sentence.
That's
their
my
guidance.
favorite thing that they've said so far.
So we should be working towards that end, working for ways to get kids back in school, not exclude them from school.
So I'm going to start like I just described, and then if we feel like we need to tighten the screws at all,
We can always do that.
we can always do that. Okay.
I really like that idea. I mean, I think anything where we're treating families and parents more as partners. I mean, that's going to be, nobody wants their kid to get someone else sick, but nobody wants their kid to be sitting at home for 2 weeks for no reason. So, I mean, to me, that's a wonderful idea.
And
I
I
also
think,
want, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I think the data we have from last year of the 500 we quarantined with maybe 0, maybe 1 or 2 getting sick gives us, evidence to say, yes, that was too much. We can try it this way.
Great. Yep.
Without being irresponsible.
Great. And just so the board knows, we now have that new quarantine guideline that if a parent gets a negative test, I think it's between days 4 and 6 of their quarantine, then they can return after 7 instead of 10 days. We would like to add that to our guidance too.
Yes,
So when
absolutely.
someone gets quarantined, they come back.
Absolutely.
Testing is more available now than it was when we wrote our original ones.
Now, so it seems like to be in the blue area, it's really hard. Like you can't, 9 cases out of 100,000,
In a week.
it's 1 out of 10,000 would knock you out of there. I mean, that just seems like it's unrealistic. But that shouldn't be the bar that we're trying to hurdle. That's way too high.
I agree, Dean. So what I'm looking at, and tell me whether or not the board agrees, is that if we are yellow or blue, and our local positivity rate and transmission rate inside our walls is low, we will carry on with what I just said. If we start getting lots of positives in the school, or lots of transmission in the school, or our communities go to orange, that would be something that would make me call you and say, hey, we'd like to crank this and this up a little bit, and see if that helps, and if not, crank this and this up a little bit. Does that sound okay with you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing is lunch. I'd like to start serving hot lunch at school again, and whenever possible, keep kids 3 feet apart in line, and have kids eat 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart, whenever possible. But I know the principals are listening right now on YouTube Live, and I know that they don't believe that they can feed their whole school in a normal set of lunch periods at 3 feet apart for all kids all the time. So in order to say that, when I say whenever possible, I truly mean whenever possible. They won't all be 3 feet apart all the time. Is that okay?
It's fine with me.
I mean, obviously, if it leads to illness or
Again,
transmission, we would send
We would have
some
to
of them to a
monitor.
classroom or
Right.
send some of them to wherever. Okay. And I'd like the kids to be able to socialize at lunch. They'll be 3 feet apart, but they can talk to anybody in any direction and face whichever direction they want, as long as everything else we said.
Is it possible for us to provide accommodations for families that would be more comfortable with social distancing?
Yes, certainly. You're talking
So
about
I mean,
lunch,
I'm
right?
talking about lunch.
Yes.
So if there's certain families that are saying, I'm not comfortable if my kid's sitting 2 feet or 18 inches from someone else, can we make arrangements so that there's a part of the cafeteria or something where they can sit a bit more spread out or something of that nature?
So I think a good majority of kids are going to be 3 feet apart, even if we do lunch the old-fashioned way. Certainly, parents who want to insist that their kid is one of them will be able to make sure they're among them. And for kids that, or for families that have an individual concern about being within 6 feet at lunch, I mean, I don't know to what extent we can accommodate, but we always work with individual families to try and get them what they want, so. And then the other stuff, daily health assessments, temperature taking at the door, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to not do that, as long as we're blue or yellow and our inside the walls numbers are good. Is the board okay with that?
Yes.
Did we feel like that helped us at all?
I don't know, it's been a while since I talked to the nurses about how many fevers they caught at the door, but the daily health certification, I don't know. I like that, I think that there were some parents that checked in with their child and realized they had a sore throat and kept them home and would have otherwise sent them to school, some, but I think that those were mass-produced by parents more than not, because it was their ticket in the door, and the kid could have had a sore throat and we wouldn't have known it, and mom wouldn't have known it, and they would have had a slip that said they didn't. Again, that was something that that was the best we could do in the time we were doing it, and really that's, if the numbers go back up, I think we should start doing it again, and we'll double down on trying to convince parents that it's important for them to make sure the kid is symptom-free before they go to school. Like, we've got an obligation to, I think, like Rick said, the school and the parents share an obligation, particularly in a pandemic, to make sure that we're not sending our kids to school ill.
Everybody's got to buy in on this, otherwise it's not going to work. Right? The
Well,
whole community's going
you're-
to have to buy in on it.
We're one generation removed from giving kids a gold star for perfect attendance and patting them on the back for coming to school with a cold. I mean,
Absolutely, played
it's a
hurt.
completely different
Absolutely.
world than it was then. So Now we're saying, whoa, you know, you're not gonna get a gold star for sending your kid to school
It's like
sick.
the opposite, yes.
Doesn't mean you're, you know, John Wayning your way to school today. Like, if you're sick, we don't want it transmission, like, sorry for the younger folks in the audience who don't know who John Wayne is. It's probably a more modern reference I could have used, but it's what I came up with. I feel like I have the details to start writing a draft plan, and then I can present it to the board, or I'll send it to the board. We'll move quicker if we don't have to.
Sure, so the details of the plan are going to be the meat and potatoes of what we do, right? And I want the community to know that we are listening, and this is not set in stone at this moment. You know, we want to hear from everyone and hear what our community feels about those thoughts, what Dr. Stawick has said, and as we move forward. And again, I'll just reiterate what I said before. We are going to open for public comment. You will be limited to 3 minutes. This is a public comment period. There will not be dialogue with the board. We will not answer questions at this point. So it is you making your statement of your opinions and thoughts of the matters that we are discussing today. Again, I'm going to ask everyone to be respectful and to just echo what Dean just said. We're all in this together, and so let's really put our heads together and think about the best way that we can serve everyone in our school community. That being said, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. I'm going to ask that you come to the lectern to give your comment, state your name, and then you have 3 minutes, and I will be timing everyone. So.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Gartland. I live at 6409 Forest View Drive in Oak Forest. My daughter is a preschooler at FERC. The school board and 146 administration know my opinion about COVID-19, vaccinations, and mask mandates. I strongly oppose both and wholeheartedly believe that there is little evidence to support the state and teachers union's stranglehold on school districts, administrations, parents, and students. My parents moved in Oak Forest in 1989. I graduated from the Old Central in 98, my sister 02, my brother 04. I grew up in Oak Forest, and I think it's a very good area to raise kids. When my wife and I were house hunting in 2017 with an infant, we were adamant about being in the 146 community of Oak Forest. We literally bought our house in Forest View Hills so our kids would attend FERC. There's something special about our kids going to the same schools as their dad, aunt, and uncle. But now that is completely in jeopardy. If 146 voluntarily adopts CDC IDPH ISBE 2001-2002 COVID-19 prevention guidelines, then we will be sending our daughter to a private Christian school on August 25th instead of FERC on August 26th. That would be quite a shame. Our Board of Education would have failed us. It would be very sad for our oldest kid to not even be able to complete preschool in the Illinois public school system. I am hopeful our Board of Education will vote in favor of optional masks, but I believe the state and or county agencies will change the guidelines last minute like they did last year. My expectation would be that my Board of Education would tell the state and teachers union to pound sand, unite with numerous other mask optional districts, disregard state guidelines or requirements, and move forward with business as usual with mask optional. According to the guideline, it emphasizes implementing layered prevention strategy, masking, distance testing to protect those who are not fully vaccinated. My daughter is not eligible for vaccination, so according to these guidelines, she would be required to wear a mask. Like I said in one of my many recent emails, according to IDPH, 20 people under the age of 20 years old. Damn. Like I said in one of my many recent emails, 20 people under the age of 20 have died from COVID-19 since the pandemic started. The death rate among people under the age of 20 is 0.009, as compared to nearly 88% of COVID-19 deaths that are 60 and over. I emailed all of you a video
Thank you.
presented by, is it? Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Saraki. I obviously prepared a speech before I heard any of you get a chance to talk, so I just want to make a quick comment on what you guys are talking about. I completely agree with everything that Rick said about how it should be the parents' choice to kind of decide, and the school can implement more measures if they see fit, if numbers start to spike. But the speech I prepared was, I have 3 children that are in District 146, and I'm here today demanding that you let us, the parents, decide what is best for our children. In regards to wearing masks in school, sorry, my voice is shaking, I'm nervous, I don't do a lot of speeches. If some parents feel comfortable with their children wearing masks, then that's fine. And if some parents feel their child shouldn't be wearing a mask at all, then that's fine also. It's our children, and it should be our choice. I've been determining what's best for my children's health over the last 13 years and will continue to. I sat back quietly last year while I watched my children sit outside socially distanced while wearing masks in school. I'm not talking about gym or recess. They were seated in class outside over 6 feet apart and still wearing masks. I guess I sold it to myself that at least they were finally in school full time. Well, no more can I sit quietly. I recently saw the governor issued a statement on masks and school. I'd like to quote him here. Families should be involved in making decisions for their own families, and school districts and boards make decisions for the districts. The governor also said that districts have the ability to make their own decisions based on COVID-19 risk in the area. And I see that a lot of other district school boards have taken that advice, such as District 5, 140, 113A, 114, 33C, and I can go on. They've had the courage to let parents decide what's best for the children, and I'm demanding that you do the same here today. If your fear is being put on probation with IDPH, then I gladly take the 1-year probation to do right by my child. Worst case, we could reevaluate next school year. It's our children, and it should be our choice. To Dr. Staywick, our district superintendent, I'm personally asking you to give us the option that your children's Manteno District 5 Superintendent, Lisa Herrod, is giving you, making masks optional. To the parents watching online and sitting quietly here today, it's time we stop standing by quietly and make our voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you again. My name is Shane Wilson. My son is registered to be an 8th grader here at Central. My son is vaccinated. The first day a vaccine was available, we immediately rushed down to Rush Hospital to get vaccinated. My family is vaccinated. I'm wearing a mask before you now because for the first time in 2 years, we left the state. And I returned today, racing back to be here to address you. And so out of respect, I'm following the general CDC guidelines, which say masks work. And we've proven masks work. We also know that vaccinations work. The head of the CDC says that of the recent fatalities from COVID, 99.5% of them are among the unvaccinated. And there's promoting vaccination. It's the very first item on the prevention strategies. The entirety of the elementary school population of this district are unvaccinated because they are not eligible. The entirety of the 6th grade of this district are ineligible for vaccination. 7th graders are ineligible until they turn 12. So those are the people we're trying to look out for. And kids do get COVID. 4 million of the cases of COVID are among children. And in fact, of the cases reported in the first week of July, 22% of the cases were among children. And as the number indicated here, and as current events have demonstrated, the numbers are going up. Just as in November, when we reopened the schools and we saw nationwide the number of cases rise, we're seeing that happen again. And we're seeing that our neighbors in Chicago have placed Missouri and Arkansas on their attentive list. We're seeing that our friends in Los Angeles County are restoring mask wearing for indoors. And yet now we're here talking about the choice to wear a mask. Choice is great if you get to pick, if you're Pepsi or Coke, because you're the only one drinking it. It's not an informed choice if someone else is making the decision for you. You may say, I'm not going to send my child to school, he's fine. But someone else has made the choice for you that they're going to send their child to school who's not fine. And you're no longer making a choice, unless you're making the choice to open yourself up to whatever fate happens to you. There are steps on this list that could help. Screening testing to properly identify cases. You're discussing not having that, which means you'll have no contact tracing, which is also up there. You'll have no means of quarantining anyone, because how are you going to know who's sick? How are you going to know who's legitimately sick? You can't demand to know if they have COVID. They can just say they have a cough. Masks work. Vaccines work. And you have a guideline that says until the vaccines are opened up to a larger population, to our kindergartners, through all of our 7th graders. I understand. Let me just conclude with one fact for you. The Peoria Journal-Star says that right now in Illinois,
Your time is up, sir.
169,000 students are vaccinated. That's less than a third of all eligible students. You're letting unvaccinated
Mr.
students
Wilson,
into the
your
school,
time is up.
and there's something you can do about that.
Hello, friends. I am Lisa Giamona. I work at FIRC, new 5th grade teacher going from accelerated math.
Thanks for coming today, Lisa.
Absolutely. I wanted just 2 things. I agree with you, the board, for the first time, with this COVID going on. I do think that the parents should have the choice, but I do want to put out there that with the variants and the ineligibility of our students, of our younger students, not being able to be vaccinated, the safest mitigation we have, the one that works the best, science proves, is masks. I don't know how often you guys were able to get in the buildings last year because of COVID, but once we went back to school, which was, we were so excited as teachers to get us back in school, that's what we wanted, it didn't look the same. I don't care what mitigations we put in. I've done what I need to do to protect myself and my family, and I know that parents are going to do what they need to do to protect themselves and their families. I want school for my students to look as normal as possible. Last year, we're sitting 3 to 6 feet apart, facing forward, not being able to work in groups, not being able to socialize, we want to go back to school because our kids need socialization. Do you know how much socialization they got last year? Okay, they were scared to talk to each other because every time they turned a separate way, the teacher had to tell them to turn back because they're pointing their faces in a way that we couldn't contact trace. You know, I want us to do, as a district, whatever we can do to get those kids back on the floor working together, to get those kids back in groups working together, critically thinking together, talking and discussing together. There's so much in our classrooms. I couldn't work in a small group with kids because we couldn't be out of our desks. You know, my small groups looked so different. My one-on-one was me sitting next to the student, but it's totally different. So what I'm just asking is that when you're thinking about what mitigations we're going to put in place, what mitigations we're going to kind of see if we need to put in place later, just think about what is going to get us on day one as close to normal as safely as possible. I have opinions. You have opinions. We all have opinions.
30 seconds.
I don't know what's going to work, but whatever we can do to get our students back to as normal as possible at lunch, in class, all of that. Masks, no masks, that's not for me to say. What for me to say is please get our kids back to as normal as possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bilal Almahas. This is my first time ever attending as an adult or as a parent. So thank you
Welcome.
for the opportunity. And also, we are recent transplants from Indiana, even though I still work in Indiana. Thank you for your efforts. I agree with the majority of the matrices and the strategies. However, I'm biased. I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a doctor. The reason for my bias is that I've lost 5 patients, unfortunately, one of which whom was vaccinated, who decided, after following with the Public Health Department in Indiana, they were all refusing to wear masks, including the vaccinated one. That's Indiana, that's not Illinois, I completely understand it. It's Porter County versus this area, Cook County and whatnot. So, to say that we're not going to require masks for kids scares me very deeply. I've seen patients, I've seen people lose their kids or their grandparents to that, and it is very scary, at least to say. So the only thing that I would recommend is not necessarily mandating masks, but it's definitely something that has to be considered. But the main thing is certification. Everyone that comes to my office has to get temperature certification. They need that because you need to protect everybody else. In terms of vaccinations, as healthcare providers, we are required to get our hepatitis B vaccines and other sets of vaccinations. Kids are usually required to get DTaP and a bunch of other, healthcare, or vaccinations for their health, for, MMR, rubella, so on and so forth. Why aren't we following suit when science tells us this is a good idea? These are my
30
personal
seconds.
feelings. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole McBride, and I'm brand new to the school district, coming from Oak Lawn. But my daughter hasn't been in school since this whole thing started. Kind of like when I saw the course of, how everything was kind of moving last March, I immediately called the school and was like, yo, what's up, primarily because my daughter's an ex-24 weeker who spent a significant amount of time in a hospital at birth and subsequent several hospital visits afterwards. A common cold will send her to the hospital for days. And I know that my daughter's case isn't the typical case, but I do know that even as I transition into the school district, that, she's in a special needs classroom, she's highly functional, but, she does have already compromised immune system. And I imagine she's not the only child in that situation. I'm not going to, advocate one way or another about whether they should mask or not mask. I'm almost as tired of her being at home as she is of being at home, and I mean that in a good way, because she wants to be around her peers. I love my daughter, but I want her to be around her peers. And so I think that, I didn't prepare anything, but I felt, as someone else said, as a parent, I should advocate and speak my voice. I want my baby to be able to come back to school to learn amongst her peers. But the flip side of that, I'll keep her at home for the next 10 years if that means saving her life. Because of everything that happens. So I think that, as she's going into 3rd grade, I'm sorry. So my ask of the board is that as you're considering all the mitigation strategies, as you're considering everything that you have to consider, please also just make sure that you're thinking about the kiddos who have immune disorders or special needs children who are in those kind of programs, that, you know, we're putting in enough measures to be able to protect those who have more compromised systems. Thank you.
Hello.
So my name is Amy Golden. I spoke a few times last year. I have two sons who are at FERIC. I did keep them home all year last year because we were very concerned about how safe they were, and we did have the ability to do that. I'm very concerned about this next year and sitting through this meeting and thinking that the idea is that you are planning on making masks recommended but not required, particularly for those who are under 12, because they don't have the option. I've been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, since the beginning of March. I got in as soon as I was able to. My husband got in through the VA as soon as he was able to, as soon as he was eligible to be vaccinated. I teach at a high school, and I think that's a whole different kind of bag there, right? Because everybody, by the time that I start school in 3 weeks, every student who wants to get a vaccine will have had the opportunity to do that. But our students, the vast majority of our students, will not have had that opportunity. My children won't. And masks, as every kind of clear scientific study and legitimate journalistic source tells us, work to protect the people around you, not to protect you. So for those who are like, well, just put your own kid in a mask and that's fine. Well, that's great, but it's not actually helping my kid, right? What happens is that when we all wear the masks, if we are unvaccinated, then we protect the people around us. And to put my children, I have really big problems with going against CDC and IDPH recommendations. They suggest layering, and I'm looking at those layers, and I don't know what the layers are that you all are talking about. I'm just a little frustrated because I'm thinking, what are the layers here? Because we're getting rid of you're saying every layer that we have had, you're suggesting that we eliminate, right? We're reducing all of the mitigations that were in place. The numbers are going up nationwide right now. Thankfully, not right now hugely in this area, but it is going up among unvaccinated people, and our kids are unvaccinated. So I just really hope that you think about what the scientific suggestions are, follow the science, and please, we are really close to getting a vaccination for younger kids. You know what, it's supposed to be coming like October, November is what they're saying, midwinter at the latest. Wait until after we have the chance as parents to actually make a decision whether or not we vaccinate our kids. Other people don't have to vaccinate their kids, that's fine with me.
30 seconds.
But give us the option to, let us wait until after then, and then take away that mitigation of masks. And by then, hopefully the rates will be so dropped that it won't matter. But give us another couple of months. The kids did it in the spring, and all seemed to be okay. Give us another couple months. Thank you.
I don't really have, my name is Crystal Schultz. I have two boys that previously attended Fulton. March 13th, 2020 was their last day of school there. Last year, we had the ability to sacrifice within our family and homeschool our children. We believe that that was the best choice for us, not based on fear of a virus, but based on telling our kids to be scared of germs when we know kids are germy. Anybody that works in education knows that kids are germy. They have runny noses, they cough, they sneeze. And for as long as I can remember, that has always been okay. Of course, I would not want to ever be responsible for my kids getting someone else sick, but I also do not want to be telling my kids that they should be feared because they sneeze. My son has allergies, so sneezing or coughing is something that happens for him. He cannot take over-the-counter medicine because it affects him. So if my child goes to school and has a cough, that is a COVID symptom, right? So then he has to go home in quarantine. So we chose to homeschool. It was beautiful and wonderful and hard. But we did it because we felt it was the best thing to do. Both my children do not wear masks. I do not wear a mask. I have not gotten sick. My husband has not gotten sick. I know people that have contracted COVID. I know people that have tested dozens of times because it was required of them at work for them to do it. I also have a doctor that opened the first COVID clinic. My doctor opened the first COVID clinic in Will County. I just visited him for an annual physical last week. And he had some very interesting things to say about this whole pandemic. One being the PCR tests and the false positive rates. Another being a lot of the shifting of what's the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do, or what's a symptom, what's not a symptom. I had to lie on my check-in.
30 seconds.
I had to lie on my check-in and say that I didn't have any symptoms of this 30 questionnaire thing. I had to lie and say that I wasn't experiencing anxiety or something because I wouldn't be allowed to go to the doctor's office. I thought the doctor's office was a place to go when you're sick. But times have changed. And I will not be sending my kids to school if masks are required. My children will not be getting a vaccine.
Thank you.
That is emergency use authorization only. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat Gartland. One thing what's the transmission rate normally, like 3 years ago? What would it be for the flu? That's what I would have a question about. Kids get sick. When we were kids, we went to someone's house that had the chicken pox, so we got them. I don't understand some of the stuff goes on here. I'm happy with what you guys sound like you're coming up with, and I hope that actually follows through. I don't go to school, so, okay, thank you.
Any further public comment? We very much appreciate the community coming out and voicing their opinions. This closes the public comment portion of the meeting. Moving on, 5.1, discussion of any new business. Is there new business from the board?
I would just like to commend the staff for putting, especially Vern did a lot of work, getting the data together for us so we can make informed decisions.
Yes.
I think he went above and beyond on that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, hearing no new business, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Secretary call the roll.
Casper?
Yes.
Dunlap?
Yes.
Shalata? Jan?
She's gone.
Okay. Lloyd, yes. Barry?
Yes?
Nenza?
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.